Buddha Kachayana. Maybe you just call it conveniently the 7 bodies group, or the 7 bodies doctrine. And by body here, what he means is, like, we call it constituent elements or fundamental components of the world. So this teacher holds the view that there are 7 types of 7 components or constituents of the world which are unmade, not created, without a creator. They're always existing eternally. They're like the 7 permanent elements or components of the world. So everything arises from the combination of these elements, but the elements themselves are uncreated and eternal. So they do not move or change or obstruct each other. And no one is able to produce pleasure, pain, or pleasure and pain in another. So what are these 7 elements? There's the earth, what's called the earth body, the water body, the fire body, the air body. Those are the 4 primary material elements. Then he recognizes pleasure and pain, 2 types of feeling. And then the 7th constituent is the soul. So there's the eternal soul, which unites with this combination of the eternal physical elements, and that constitutes a living being. And as a consequence, he goes on to say, there is no killer, no slaughterer, no hearer, speaker, cognizer, and so on. So even if one cuts off somebody else's head with a sharp sword, one does not deprive anyone of life. The sword merely passes through the space between the 7 elements. Or maybe we would say that the sword merely severs the connection between the soul and the material body. So the soul will go off to rebirth elsewhere. It remains permanent and unchanging. And the material elements of the body still remain eternally, remain forever, though no longer connected with that soul. So it doesn't really matter if one kills anybody, because one doesn't, let's say it doesn't matter if we, as convention puts it, we kill somebody, because ultimately nobody and nothing is killed. The soul just lasts forever and just goes on to a new body. Does anybody know of any religious work where we find a resonance of this view? Very famous, important religious work. Yeah.
It's very similar to the Bhagavad Gita.
Exactly.
But the Bhagavad Gita doesn't deny it.
Yeah, that is so. Yeah.
This seems like a defilement of that teaching.
Yeah, except of course the Bhagavad Gita teaching probably comes several centuries, or at least in writing it comes several centuries later. But the Bhagavad Gita uses the argument that because the soul, the Atman, is eternal, that Krishna tries to persuade his pupil Arjuna that he could go into battle and kill the people in the battle, because the soul itself is eternal, everlasting, and won't die. But this doesn't mean that the Bhagavad Gita upholds a kind of moral anarchy. It seems almost that that is kind of a rhetoric that Krishna uses to persuade Arjuna to fulfill his duty as a kshatriya, as a warrior. Yeah, you're going, Richard?
The oddity of that work is that it's actually the losers are more moral than the winners. That is, Arjuna is on the winning side, but the most heroic and the most genuine characters are actually people who are killed off in Arjuna's family. Right? And part of what Arjuna is being told is, look, it doesn't matter. You are predestined to win. You have to win, because even though they are individually better than you are,
Yeah.
right? This is the side you were born into. This is, and so it's a kind of it's a caste battle.
Yeah.
And it's very curious that, for instance, Gandhi regarded the Bhagavad Gita as a pacifist text.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think that he was reading it the way that he read it because his tutors were Jains.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Rabindranath Tagore, who was raised as a Hindu,
Yeah.
does have that kind of doctrine. So, like, he has poems that say things like the tree invites the axe man to chop it down. You know, like the tree makes space for the axe to bite into the
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, then this is followed by, in the text, by a long, strange cosmology. I don't want to go into the details of that, but just we could see, like, what is the main point of this teaching comes towards the end, going down about 3/4 of the way. He says there are 8,400,000 great aeons wherein, by running and wandering through the round of rebirths, fools and the wise both will make an end of suffering. In other words, that there's like a fixed period of cycling through the round of rebirths, and then when one reaches the end of that, then one gets liberated, whether one is wise or foolish. And so there's no point in observing any kind of virtue or observance or asceticism, because pleasure and pain are meted out. The round of rebirths is limited. There is no shortening it, no extending it, no increasing it, no decreasing it. Then he uses the simile of a ball of string. When you hold on one end of the thread of the string and throw the ball just keeps on unwinding until all of the string has unwound, and then that's the end of the ball of thread. And so in the same way, fools and the wise, they each have their predestined time to wander through this round of rebirths. And when they go through these 84,000 aeons, then they make an end of suffering. Okay, so again, the wise person reflects that it's pointless to lead the spiritual life under this kind of teaching. Okay, so these are the 4 ways that negate the living of the spiritual life. Then Sandaka expresses his appreciation, and he asks Ananda to go further and to explain the 4 ways of the 4 kinds of holy life that are without consolation, that have been spoken of by the Buddha. And this picks up on page 623, section 21. Okay, the first view is, and then there's a rather pointed attack taking place here. Ananda says, some teacher claims to be omniscient and all-seeing, to have complete knowledge and vision, no matter what he's doing all the time, uninterruptedly. He has this omniscience, omniscient knowledge. And yet, when he goes on alms round, he might enter an empty house. You know, he thinks somebody is living there. He goes into the house, and it's empty. If he was omniscient, he should have known not to go into that house. And so he gets no alms food there, or he goes down a street where a dog a dog bites him. He meets with a wild elephant, a wild horse, a wild bull. If he was omniscient, he should have known to avoid that area. He has to ask about the name or the clan of a person, the name of a village or a town. And then if somebody tries to, point out that this contradicts his claim to omniscience, then he says, well, I had to enter the empty house, that's why I entered it. I had to get no alms food, that's why I didn't get any. I had to be bitten by the dog, that's why I was bitten, and so on. And so he tries to ascribe all of that to some kind of predestination. Does anybody know who is being parodied in this section? There's a specific rival of the Buddha. Yeah, this is Mahavira, the historical founder, or at least the best-known teacher of Jainism. Also, Mahavira, in the Buddhist text, he's known as Nikanta Nataputta. And sometimes I have to say, I wonder whether the Buddhist texts really correctly represent the Jain position. One gets the feeling, when the Buddha is criticizing the Brahmins, he's still in a way respectful of the Brahmins and tries to give them as much room, as much leeway as he can. But when the Buddhist texts are speaking about the Jains, the tone almost becomes a bit caustic and mocking, ridiculing.
Yeah, I think there are two reasons for that. One is living in a brahminical society in which he's in danger if he isn't complimentary to the Brahmins. And secondly, the Jains were his closest competitors, and frequently the separation between people or groups with very similar exceptions is a lot sharper because they both seek to emphasize the differences between them, competing for the same space.
Yeah, I'm not so much, as I said at the beginning, I'm not sure of the extent to which the Brahmins held strongly powerful positions in the northeast of India at that time. But,
Yeah, in the area that, the Buddha was raised in what's now southern Nepal, and the caste system was probably looser there, but I think that in the Ganges basin itself, it was at its strongest.
From what I've read, even in the Ganges basin, the class system had not yet been as well established as it was. Well, let's say it had been established, but the Brahmins were not in the dominant position that they held in the central and western parts of India. But certainly the second reason that you give, that there seems to have been is reluctant to use the word, but a certain degree of competition between the Buddhist community and the Jain community. Katie. They might, like I said, I question whether they always represent the opponent's position correctly. Excuse me?
That's a good point.
Oh.
Whether Gautama would have actually addressed this versus students who are not Buddhists following and attempting to record this. Students that were always getting through and to record the dialogue, or for some hindrances, whereas Gautama wasn't necessarily like
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that these kind of representations come in through later generations that we don't have any way to know for sure. But there are suttas in which the Buddha never meets Mahavira face to face. They never have a discussion between them. But one does see suttas where the Buddha meets disciples of Mahavira and engages them in discussions.
So I guess my thing would be, for Tama, if one trusted he's the genius that lives on through history, it wouldn't serve him to misrepresent his opponent. It would serve him to represent his opponent perfectly well, and therefore, if something like this is misrepresentative of Jainism, that would be one way of saying maybe this is expression of students who are not as...
That is so, yeah. And I don't know enough about Jainism to be able to say to what extent he's representing Jainism correctly, especially the Jainism in the period in which the Buddha lived, because we don't have scriptures that actually come down from that period. The Jain scriptures record the position of Jainism several centuries later. Okay, so anyway, this becomes the first reason why, you see, this type of position, it doesn't negate the possibility of a spiritual life, but the spiritual life is unsatisfactory because the teacher makes a claim to omniscience, and yet that claim is belied by aspects of his behavior. And so one can't place full trust in that teacher. Okay, then the second position, this is the position pretty much of the Brahmins. This is on paragraph 24. Some teacher is a traditionalist, one who regards oral tradition as truth, and he teaches the Dharma by oral tradition, by the legends handed down, by the authority of the collections. Okay, so this is the way the Brahmins transmitted their teaching, by oral transmission from teachers to students. The Vedas were transmitted by memorization from generation to generation, and they were always accepted on the authority of the ancient rishis, the ancient sages who were supposed to have received the Vedas by a kind of divine revelation and then passed them down through a lineage of sages. But the Buddha points out that when a teacher is a traditionalist, some of his teachings will be well transmitted, and some teachings will be badly transmitted. Some will be true, and some will be false. And so this kind of spiritual life is without consolation. The third position is the position of, we would call them rationalists. So this is the case, paragraph 27, where the teacher is a reasoner, somebody who works just with logical reasoning. So he teaches his Dharma, which has been hammered out by reasoning, following a line of inquiry according to his own intuition as it occurs to him. So this is a teaching not based on a higher level of realization and attainment, but a purely intellectual or philosophical system, such as we find mostly in Western philosophy. Okay, so when a teacher is a reasoner or rationalist, some of his teachings will be well-reasoned and others will be wrongly reasoned, some true, some otherwise. And so one doesn't want to lead the spiritual life under, say, Immanuel Kant or George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel or Bertrand Russell, or somebody who works purely at the intellectual level, because they wouldn't be able to guide one to an experiential realization of higher truth. And so one doesn't, that kind of holy life is without consolation. And then we come to the fourth type of teaching. This is paragraph 30. Again, I think there's a little bit of parody taking place here. This is a teacher he's described as somebody who's dull and confused. And because he's dull and confused, when he is asked such and such a question, he engages in verbal wriggling in what's called eel wriggling, because the eel just swims around like this. And if you try to catch the eel with the hands, it will slip out of the hands. So this is the kind of person that you can't pin down to a definite position. So if you ask him, is it like this? He'll say, I don't say it is like this. I don't say it's like that. I don't say it's otherwise. I don't say it's not so. I do not say it's not so. And it seems that this is a position similar to that of the skeptics, those who refuse to make definite commitments on any of these key philosophical questions. And it could be that these skeptics, even in the Buddha's, in the part of India where the Buddha lived, could have really been quite intelligent and quite sharp-witted, and they could have understood that all of these positions have built-in contradictions, and so if one takes any fixed stand, it can be undermined by some hidden flaw within that position itself. And so for this reason, they might have refused to make definite statements or to have taken definite positions. But it seems in a kind of sarcastic or pejorative way, the text is describing that teacher as dull and confused. Does that seem to be the case, Richard? You know the skeptics of Greece. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. From yeah. 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 Right, yeah. Yeah. Okay, do we have any questions on anything that have been covered so far? Okay, Tracy.
The popular historian of religion, Karen Armstrong, wrote a biography of the Buddha for the general audience, and she portrays the scene at the time of the Buddha's teaching, which I kind of get from this, that it was a time of restlessness and search, and that going forward would almost be, can't think of a parallel today, like looking for a solution to the environmental problem.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the case that it was a time of restlessness and general stagnation and an inordinate number of teachers popping up as she portrays?
Oh yeah, definitely that seems to be the case from the wide variety of views we find here in the Brahmajala Sutta, because the old sort of primarily agrarian society was being transformed by the rapid expansion of cities, and then the old political system of small states was being transformed by the emergence of large, powerful monarchies, which were big fish were swallowing up the little fish and transforming these, absorbing these small states into themselves and then turning into expanding monarchies, which were clashing with one another, and then wars were taking place. And new value, as this society was becoming more mercantile, new values were supplanting the old values, coming down from the Vedic period. So it was a time of transition, transitional period of great social, economic, political transformation. Okay, I just want to go rather quickly through the rest of the sutta. So now we have the 4 types of spiritual life that are without consolation. Then Ananda explains the spiritual life wherein a wise man certainly would live the holy life, and by living it would attain the true way, the Dhamma that is wholesome. And then Ananda explains the gradual training of the Buddha, starting from a Buddha's appearing in the world, then the training of the disciple, the elimination of the 5 hindrances, the attainment of the 4 jhanas, the achievement of the 3 higher knowledges, up to the liberation of the mind from the taints and the attainment of liberation from birth and death. That's paragraph 50, which ends with the attainment of arahatship. Then Sandaka will ask Ananda 2 questions, actually several questions, but the first one is whether when one becomes an arhat, completely liberated through final knowledge, one could enjoy sensual pleasures. And the question seems to be asking whether an arhat could indulge in sexual enjoyment, in sexual intercourse. But Ananda's reply takes a somewhat different track. He says that when a monk is an arhat who has destroyed the taints, he is incapable of transgression in 5 cases. He's incapable of deliberately depriving a living being of life, incapable of stealing or taking what is not given. He's incapable of indulging in sexual intercourse. He's incapable of false speech, deliberately speaking falsehood. Then the 5th is that he is incapable of enjoying sensual pleasures by storing them up as he formerly did in lay life. And what this means, it doesn't mean that he's storing up a entourage of beautiful women to enjoy, but it means that the arhat is incapable of storing up foodstuffs to enjoy on later days. Of course, the paradigm for the arhat in the Buddha's time was that of the monastic disciple who lives on alms given by others. And so he'll collect enough food to support himself and maybe some of the fellow monks just for that day. Then the next day he'll be open to receive new offerings from others. But actually in the Buddha's time it became obligatory to have some way of storing food because the monasteries would be offered more food than they need. So a system was worked out of having a storage area where foodstuffs can be stored, and the responsibility for maintaining the store area would fall to a lay disciple who lives at the monastery. He's like a monastery attendant or a steward of the monastery. So if the monks are given raw foodstuffs to use for preparing meals, then the steward would take them, put them in the storage area, and take responsibility for preparing them for the monks. Okay, so this is the first question. The second question, this is an interesting point. Sandaka asks whether an arhat is always, continuously, and uninterruptedly aware that his taints are destroyed, that he is free from the taints. Then Ananda answers him with a rather bizarre simile. He says, suppose there were a man whose arms and feet had been cut off. Would he be continuously and uninterruptedly aware that his arms and feet have been cut off, whether he's sleeping or awake? And the answer is that he wouldn't be aware of this, but he would be aware of this only when he reflects on his condition. And so it's the same with the arahat. he doesn't have this knowledge and vision that his taints are destroyed continuously and uninterruptedly present to him all the time, even when sleeping, but rather it's only when he reflects back on that fact that he knows my taints are destroyed. So all the time his taints are destroyed, but he's not always aware of that fact. It's not always present to him consciously. Okay, then Sandaka asked the Buddha, and I'm not sure that this translation is correct. I would translate it now, how many emancipated ones are there in this Dhamma and discipline? How many have achieved emancipation in this teaching? Then Ananda says, there are not only 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, but even far more emancipated ones in this Dhamma and discipline. Okay, so when Sandaka hears this, then he's delighted. He says it's wonderful, it's marvelous. Then he adds that there is no praising of one's own Dhamma and no disparaging of the Dhamma of others, but there is the teaching of the Dhamma in its full range. I guess that range would be from all of the stages of the disciple's cultivation, from undertaking the moral precepts to the attainment of arhatship. So there would be the teaching of the Dhamma in its full range, and there would be so many emancipated ones. Then he says, but these Ajivakas, the Ajivakas, this was another school contemporary with the Buddha, which was under the leadership of Makali Gosala. They laud themselves and disparage others, and they recognize only 3 emancipated ones, namely Nandavacha, Kisa Sankicha, and Makali Gosala. We don't know very much about Nandavacha and Kisa Sankicha, but Makali Gosala was this teacher contemporary with the Buddha who is regarded historically as the founder of the Ajivakas, a sect which continued in India for many centuries, I think down to about the 15th century. Okay, after Sandaka makes this declaration, then he turns to his own followers and he says, go, sirs, live the spiritual life under the recluse Gautama. So he's sending his own followers away to become disciples of the Buddha. But he says, it's not easy for me now to give up gain, honor, and renown. It seems because he's a highly regarded teacher, he's not willing himself to give up his position as a teacher and then become a disciple of the Buddha. But it's a little puzzling. He recognizes the superiority of the Buddha's teaching, and so he sends his own followers to become disciples of the Buddha. I would think that if he were really wise, he would have, and humble, he would have given up his attachment to his position as teacher and become a disciple of the Buddha. Okay, so that's the end of the sutta. Any questions or comments? So time is running short, so we have to... Allison? Maybe take the microphone.
I'm just curious about the last sentence you said. You were wondering why he decided to dissemble his whole...
His disciples, yeah.
Right, he sent his disciples to Buddha's
Yeah.
but he would not go.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, is it pride, one of the 5 aggregates? How do we, this is nothing to do with this, but the most difficult one I have found is the pride.
Yeah.
And for this lesson, I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
We can work on that.
Work on pride.
Right.
Sometimes it's good deliberately to do things wrongly, a little stupidly, a little clumsily, so other people will criticize you, and then it helps to knock down one's pride. But otherwise, one could contemplate the five aggregates as being not mine, not I, not myself. Or when one does anything, doing something that's excellent and outstanding, one just reflects not I, not mine, not myself. And then that will help to diminish pride. We could discuss that more after lunch, but time is running out, so I just want to make two brief announcements. One is that today at 2 p.m. there'll be a lecture in the library on the topic of mindfulness and health by a lecturer from Taiwan who has a doctorate from Australia. Wan Zhong Guan, is that his name? Gwen, right? So, if you have the time, and please come for that. The other is, I don't like to do this for self-promotion, but I want to save you some money. That my translation of the Anguttara Nikaya, which I completed all the work on about a little more than a week ago, it's scheduled for publication from Wisdom Publications for the fall, but Wisdom Publications is offering a special pre-publication discount. If you order it before August 15th, you can get it at a 40% discount off the list price. So it will be $45. It's 1,950 pages, something like that. And it's a hardback, nicely printed, produced hardback.
Is it likely that you will teach from that?
Maybe.
We also send a PDF, substantial PDF preview.
You get it the preview. I haven't gotten it.
I asked, I said, how can you give a preview if it's not done? But they send a really substantial. It's not a small section.
Yeah, they send the preview if you submit the advance order. And the advance order also covers free postage, and they'll send it directly from the press to your address. So if you're interested, please don't wait until after August 15th, but place the order now. Okay, so I'm just going to do a very, very quick sharing of the merits, and then we'll come back at, say, 12:15, and then have some discussion. I'm going to do this in really fast style. Akasa ta chabhuma ta deva naga mahedika punyantang anumoditpa chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasa ta chabhuma ta deva naga mahedika punyantang anumoditpa chirang rakantu desanang. Akasa ta chabhuma ta Deva naga mahedika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabbe bhutanumodantu sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya bhavagupadaya vichihetato etantare satakayupapanna rupya rupicha sanya sanino dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibbuttim. Okay, we do end with the three bows. And next week we'll have the class on Sutta number 77, which is a pretty dense sutta, so I have to take it over several weeks. And this is really very rich in including many different aspects of the Buddha's teaching that we'll elaborate on.
Thank you.